Alright, welcome to the video, first part. I'm going to try to get through it as quick as possible so you don't have a really long video. First page will be part 1, second page will be part 2. Alright, first question, you have to do Pythagorean theorem. So make sure that you do write the Pythagorean theorem first. You know how strict I am about this. Plug and chug. Remember that the value of C is always the hypotenuse. Add these two together, you do get 452. Take the square root, no decimals please. 452 breaks up to be the square root of 4, square root of 113. That gives you 2. So the answer is 2 square root 113. Okay, next one. Remember, value of C is always going to be the hypotenuse. So it really doesn't matter what B is. So H is going to be B. Remember I told you to write this twice. That's what the little square means. It means write it twice. 4 is a whole number. 9 is a square root. So the square root of 9 is 3. So this whole entire thing is equal to 12. And then here, write it twice. 25, whole number. Don't break it down. 21 times 21 is 441. That's a square root. Break that. 21. That gives you 525. So we have 12 plus b squared equals 525. Minus 12 on both sides. Then we're left with 513. Take the square root. This breaks down to square root of 9 times the square root of 57. This becomes 3. So your answer is equal to 3 square root 57. Remember, for Pythagorean theorem, I want no decimals. Remember, you can stop and pause the video and rewind as much as you want, especially if you think I'm going too fast. Alright, we have a television set, usually in the form of a rectangle, and we have the diagonal that goes through the television set, and they said that the television screen is 16 by 12. So I put 16 here, 12 here, and we have to find the value of the diagonal. So again, this is Pythagorean theorem. Plug and chug. Add these two together. You get 400. Great thing about 400, it is a perfect square. So you just simply get 20. So that means that the diagonal is 20 inches. Okay, these two represent the special right triangles. You should memorize these. We have the 30, 60, 90. So we have 2a, a radical 3, and a. And then you also have the 45, 45, 90. You should memorize these rules. So if you look up at the first example, you see that it's a 30, 60, 90 because there's 60 here. Do not do SOHCAHTOA. No SOHCAHTOA. So you look across from 60, it's 24 radical 3, so it follows this rule. That's a radical 3, which means this is a, and this is 2a. So that means a has to be 24, and then 2a would be 2 times 24, which is 48. So that's how we got those two answers. Now in the next one we have two different shapes in one. So what I would suggest you do is you separate. That way it won't confuse you. so then first thing you'll do is work on the left-hand side. So totally ignore the right-hand side. So it looks like this 45, 45, 90 here, you know that's a 45. So that means that if this is 45, 45, 90, the hypotenuse is a radical 2, and both sides are going to be a. So that means that a is going to be 12. Okay, so that takes care of that side. Now there's no x and y values on that side. So now we are going to go to the other side, kind of ignoring. And we are only going to focus on what was given to us that pertains to this triangle. So we found out that this side was equal to 12. So once again, it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So we know that anything that's across from 30 is A. Anything that's across from 60 is A radical 3. And then the hypotenuse is going to be 2A. So, being that A is 12, I'm just going to plug in a 12 here, meaning that the value for y is 12 radical 3. And then this would be 2 times 12, which is 24. Notice how there is no need really for a calculator with this section. Alright, that concludes page 1. Now we're moving on to page 2. Remember, if you felt I went a little too fast, make sure that you pause and rewind the video. Alright, again, memorize your rules. Okay, I'm going to see if I can just highlight this section. So I don't have to keep writing it. Alright, good. So now we see that this is a 30, 60, 90. So if this is 30, across from 30 is A, across from 60 is A radical 3, and across from the box is 2A. So if this is 2A, that means if 12 is 2A, that means A equals 6. Which means y is going to be 6. And then I'm just going to take this 6 and put it with radical 3, meaning that x is going to be 6 radical 3. Alright, looking here, this is a 45, 45 triangle. So that means that both of these should be A, and that should be A radical 2. Now, your hypotenuse is not always going to be A radical 2. So just because there's a radical 2 in the basic formula doesn't mean that a hypotenuse will have a radical 2. Right now my hypotenuse is 12. So if I want to get the value of my 2A's, I'm going to have to set this equal to 12. And then I will solve for A, because what I want is A. So A is equal to 12 over radical 2. Knowing that you're not supposed to have a radical in the denominator, I rationalize. And I'm left with 12 radical 2 over 2. You can divide your whole numbers, and you get 6 radical 2. Now, if that's too hard for you to remember, you can always do Pythagorean theorem as well. So you would have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and it winds up being a squared plus a squared equals 12 squared. So 2a squared equals 144, divide by 2. A squared equals 72. Take the square root. Then you have to break that down into two factors. So that becomes 36 and 2, and a becomes 6 radical 2 another way. Now this way that I just did only works for 45, 45, 90 triangles. So if everything that I wrote on this side is too confusing, you can always do this as well and get the same answer. Alright, here we have a rectangle. We know that it's a rectangle because opposite sides are parallel. And then we know that because that's 30 and this is a corner, then that's 90, meaning that we have, again, a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Now remember, opposite angles in a rectangle are equal because they're alternate interior. So now we have to remember these rules again. Okay, so across from 60 is a radical 3. So right now, a radical 3 equals 15 radical 3 because it's across from 60. So if I want to solve for a, I divide by radical 3. These are the same radicals, so they can cancel out. And I'll be left with a equals 15. My a is always across from 30. So this is going to be 15. So if the left is 15, then the right is 15. And then if I follow this rule, across from the right angle would be 2a. So this would be 2 times 15, which gives me 30 for y. Alright, looking here, again we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And because these two sides are congruent, that's why both of these sides can be 60 degrees. So if I look here, I notice that the side across from 60 is 18. So that means across from 60 is supposed to be a radical 3. So since this is supposed to be a radical 3 and I have no radical next to it, I have to solve for this, meaning that my a is now going to have a radical next to it. So a radical 3 is equal to 18. Divide both sides by radical 3. Now, of course, you're not supposed to have a radical in the denominator, so you rationalize. And now these can cancel out and reduce to 6 radical 3 because 18 divided by 3 is 6. Remember that if a is going to be 6 radical 3, the hypotenuse is 2a. That's 2 times 6 radical 3, meaning that we only multiply the coefficients, and that's how we get 12 radical 3. Alright, now we're going to look at 18 and 19, and that will conclude this video. 18 asks for the approximate perimeter, and it's going to also ask for the exact area. Alright, so again, this is a 30, 60, 90. So if you remember in a 30, 60, 90, across from 30 is going to be a, across from 60 is a radical 3, and across from the 90-degree angle is 2a. So that means the value of a radical 3 is equal to 22. So we're going to actually use this to solve for a. Divide by radical 3, and then we're going to have to rationalize. So that means that this side here, my shortest side, is 22 radical 3 over 3. Now 2a will be 2 times 22 radical 3 over 3, meaning I only need to multiply these two. So the hypotenuse is 44 radical 3 over 3. So now to get the perimeter, you're going to add 22 radical 3 over 3 plus 22 plus 44 radical 3 over 3. Great thing is most of you have the TI, so you can just put it all in your calculator just the way that you see it. But you're going to have some parentheses if you have the black or the clear color calculator. If you have the TI 84 plus Silver Edition, you might not need so many parentheses. So I do 22 radical 3, close parentheses over 3, close that set. That only takes care of the first. Then I do plus 22, plus parentheses again, 44, radical 3, close that parenthesis, divided by 3, close that. So you'll notice I have a parenthesis here, and I have a parenthesis there. That opens and closes the whole set. And then, well actually, there's a parenthesis here to close that set. And then a parenthesis here and here to close that set. Okay? So each fraction has to have their own set of parentheses because the calculator does everything in PEMDAS. So if you don't cover your fractions in parentheses, it won't recognize it as a fraction. Alright, then you just press enter, and there is the perimeter. Remember, we only want 3 decimal places, so you kind of want to disregard all of these numbers if they're lower than 5. Okay, so if this fourth number here is lower than 5, you're only going to write up until the 105, and that's how I got my perimeter. And remember, perimeter only has feet. Okay, area is not going to have, is going to have feet squared. Perimeter only has feet. Now, when it says exact, you know you need radical. So our area formula is 1/2 base times height. The base is the bottom, so we say 22. And the height will be the vertical side, which is 22 radical 3 over 3. Now, being that you have 2 sets of fractions, to get the numerator, you're just going to multiply all of the numbers at the top. So 1 times 22 times 22 gives you 484. Ignore the radical until we write it in now. So when you're multiplying, you're just going to multiply these 3 numbers. Now multiply your denominators, which will give you 6. Clearly, that is not reduced. So in your calculator, you do 484 divided by 6. You know that they both can be divided by 2. So to reduce a fraction in your calculator, you just press math, and then you press enter, and then you press enter again, and it'll reduce it to 242 over 3. And then you can just throw the radical 3 next to it. So kind of ignore the radical when you're putting things in your calculator. And that's why I have that as my area. Okay, 242 radical 3 over 3 feet squared. Alright, last question in this video would be number 19. Now, although number 19 is given to you as a radical, by the time you're done, you're going to have all decimals. Because once you see the word approximate, this means decimals to 3 places. Actually, all of our decimals will be to 3 places, unless otherwise noted. So because this is not 30, 60, 90, and it is not 45, 45, 90, we have to use SOHCAHTOA. Okay, remember, in order to get all your points, make sure you show the formula. Then you show your plug-in. Now your opposite is going to be this side. We'll call it X, or you can call it H for height. And then to solve for x, you just cross multiply. Now you can put this in your calculator, which is great because, and make sure that your mode is in degree mode or else you'll get a different answer. So you can do 8 radical 5 close parentheses times the sine of 21 close parentheses. And that'll give you 6.4. Notice how this fourth number is 6, so you have to round it up to 6.411. That is your height. Now for your base, it winds up being cosine. So again, write your formula. I know this is a lot to write, but the more you write, the more points you're going to get. Okay, so cosine of 21 equals adjacent over hypotenuse, cross multiply, and you will put the same thing into your calculator like I just did. But instead of sine 21, it'll be cosine 21. And that comes out to be 16.700. Notice how the third number is 3, so you don't particularly need to write all the zeros. Actually, you can just keep this as 16.7 because of the zeros. And this represents your base. Okay, so now for your perimeter, you have 6.411 plus 16.7 plus 8 radical 5. Put that all together, and I'm going to keep showing you on the calculator so that it's comfortable. 6.411 plus 16.7 plus 8 radical 5. Notice I can put everything in the calculator. And it'll give you 40.995. Now because of this 5, we have to round up by adding 1. If you add 1 to 999, that's 999, it becomes 1,000. Of course, you can't put 1,000. You have to put that 1 here to make it 1,000. So that's why I rounded it to 41.000. Or you can just write 41 feet. Okay, remember your area is 1/2 base times height. Remember, always write your formula. Your base is 16.7. Your height is 6.411. And again, if you're going to put in your calculator, you do 1/2 times 16.7 times 6.411. And there's our 53 point. See how it says 531? Our fourth number is 8, so we must round up to 532. 532. And there you have it. That's your area. Remember, the more work you show, the more points you get. This question here would probably only be about 7 points because we would only give you maybe 1 or 2 points for the SOHCAHTOA part. And our main goal would be for you to show how you got your final answer. Alright, good luck. This is only part 1, so stay tuned for part 2.